Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Deep Thoughts. On this fairly still, I guess it's technically a Thursday morning here. So I thought we would do an episode that is sort of the peripheral subject matter. Well, it's a peripheral experience, I should say, to a lot of things that we have researched, found to be more true than false. And then you run into this thing called crushing consensus. And I'm going to define that as you do your research on the moon missions. And you've come to the conclusion that, hey, you don't know everything that happened on the days that they said they were traveling to the moon, doing maneuvers on the moon and coming back from the moon. But you know they never made it. Low orbit at best. At best. You run into something like the Peter projection map. And you realize that the continents aren't shaped the way they are on the globes that you've viewed your entire life. And at first you're like, well, that's interesting. But you don't really care. You're just like, oh, okay. Big deal. They're generally the same shape. I mean, it's not like it's Mickey Mouse's head is Africa or something. So whatever, you got to make that tiny adjustment. But then you mention that to someone and oh my God, they lose their cool, man. You study cosmology. You study electrical universe. And then you have to listen to Big Bang crap or black hole crap. And you're like, hey, you know what? I don't think we know how the universe started. Just a hunch that we don't know. That man, of all things, can't figure out how the pyramids were built, but man, we figured out how the universe started. And then you share that opinion, and what happens? Crushing consensus. Well, it gets old, doesn't it? And so, you know, in 2021, boy, do we have some crushing consensus, don't we? We have two major ones. There's more than two. I guess one of the consensus is that there's something actually out there. A bunch of other illnesses disappeared, but there's something, you know, with a new name that's doing it. Then there's, what do you do to get rid of it? We were told for a year, just put these things on your face for 2 weeks and boom, it'll all be gone. All right. Now, there's a bunch of experimental, non-approved medications that are supposed to be injected in your body. Never been approved by the medical organizations that approve those things, whether they be bought off or not. They're bought off, I guarantee you. And they're still not willing to put their name on it. Like, no way, man. Thank you for Warp Speed, Trump. Now we'll get this injected into everybody. How this dude is actually, I mean, how we have a guy who has a following who will not take the shot. But he's the one that got it through the system with a stroke of a pen. Again, no medical approval that it's good for you. In fact, all these other super duper awake people like us in the medical industry are saying, don't you dare take that. How's he getting a free pass? I mean, is this the B-Arc situation from Douglas Adams' Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Where they just take all the dumb people, put them on the B-Arc and tell them, hey, you know, well, the rest of us, the scientists and the inventors are on the A, and the builders are on the C, but all you phone sanitizers and marketing executives, you just go off on the B because we need you to be there first for us, right? And they're all narcissistic people, so they're like, yeah, of course we go first. Anyway, I run into this thing I'm talking about all the time. And it happens in different ways, right? We experience it personally through perhaps interaction online primarily. Don't you dare voice your opinion against the masses because they've orchestrated software bots and brainwashed 90% of the world to go along with whatever is going to make them feel popular. You know, what's funny is, I should say more interesting than funny. I'm always interchanging those words. Once you build a disenfranchised society, you get super duper weak-minded people. It doesn't mean they're stupid. Perhaps ignorant. We're all ignorant of a bunch of stuff. We just don't know yet because we're ignorant of it. But there's this ostracizing thing. Oh my God, I've got nothing to offer society, the person believes falsely, and I better do anything I possibly can to stay in the tribe. because that's what they've focused on. Except today we actually raise children to believe that they are not accepted by society by telling them, well, look in the mirror, see that thing on your face, see the thing, look inside your mind, you see how you're weird. And there's people out there that don't believe the way that you believe, and they hate you and they want to kill you, which doesn't really exist in any number for any one of us. And so they've just socially engineered a reaction mechanism, a involuntary muscle reflex situation. And this is what is keeping, it's the inertia. I mean, it is the opposing force to any force that's trying to move us in the direction we were going, which is a dynamic direction to say, oh, look over there. That's pretty cool. Hey, man, never met you before. Come on in the crowd. Grab a stick. Sit down. So I'm in Huntington Beach, California. Got a little smoke lounge we go to. Always talk about it, right? And there's a very interesting thing that occurs because most smoke lounges are sports lounges, tons of TVs, big leather sofas. But ours is like a man cave with everything from John Wick to like some really cool Jap anime frames that the owner did when he was in his 20s. He also sells instruments, so we got tons of instruments all around us, like brass instruments for kids. But we just sit and we chill. It's so deep thoughts. It's crazy. But what ends up happening is we get sort of our indigenous community comes in, and they expect to be accepted, but they also expect to have to fight the ego trip that's usually going on at these places. I mean, some people go and put better clothes on to go to a smoke lounge. It's really strange because they know there's going to be Lambos out front and all this stuff. Now we have a Ferrari and some other cars out front, but we're just not pretentious, man. But then we get people from other states coming in, and they're a little nervous, right? They've been told all these lies about Orange County, California. And let's say it's a black guy. And some of them come in and they know it's going to be cool. They've been to our town before. They realize we're a melting pot of melting pots. It's great. But some people will come in and with this bad information, this crushing consensus about who we are. And they walk in, they're a little nervous. And then we're just like, hey, man, come on in, man. What's up? You know, we sit them down or whatever. We take them through all the sticks or whatever. And there's no registration of this sort of nutty liberal thing, this extremist, not just a liberal person, but just, you know, those AOC nutbags that tell you, man, you see a white person, kill them because they're trying to kill you first. I walk in, it's all good. We have the greatest conversations. We make friends. Next time they're in town, they show up. This happens all the time. We even have kids that are very liberal. They come in and you can tell the way that they behave and sort of what they talk about. And we'll find out that they're kind of opposed to the general consensus in the room and nobody throws it in their face. No one's impolite. Just let them do their own thing. Talk about something other than politics and religion, right? Like a normal human being. So I'm blessed to be in an area where this crushing consensus is not a huge part of what's going on. In terms of the medical regimens, well, everyone's doing their own thing. Everyone's pretty, it's probably about 40% total ignoring this crap. 60% puts the thing on their face when they don't have to. Now, of course, there's stores out there where if you want to buy food to eat, you're going to have to do something if you can't go through a drive-through, right? But this is something we have to deal with constantly, so I thought I'd spend at least an hour on it. We have to be strong enough to hold our position. But at the same time, unless you are being forced personally to take their position, like an inquisition, you don't really have to react to it at all. It's not heartwarming to find out that you're in a place where you don't think people are being terribly intelligent, or you don't think they've done any research on anything because they're swallowing what's being thrown at them. There's an interesting thing I mentioned a long time ago. I'd watched this series on trash waste management in major cities. It's a series. It's on a DW World. It's like Deutsch World channel or whatever, documentary channel on YouTube. Highly recommend you watch at least a few of them, especially watch the African ones. in Uganda and what have you. It'll open your mind as to what the hell's going on. But there's one that's kind of mixed between Africa and New York City. And this is where this sort of statistical reality was dropped about why waste is created at the level it's created, because they were doing statistics of, how much food is prepared in New York City that is never served and thrown away, versus Uganda, where people have to come to work in the morning, search through the trash to find breakfast, work all day, taking similar breaks for other food, and then sell enough to feed their family for 2 or 3 days while they continue to go out working 7 days a week, every day, right? Long hours. And they said something brilliant, which I think sort of applies to symbolically and mechanically to what we're dealing with in society today. They said that rich people create waste because they can. It's an ego move. They buy things and throw them away. I mean, there's tons of jokes, right? It used to be the old joke in the 70s. He'd buy a new car the second the ashtrays were full. So that's interesting. The other one is that poor people create tons of trash because their life is so chaotic and so paycheck to paycheck and so moment to moment, they can't care about where they put their trash. They're borderline feral trying to survive. I think that immediately with this issue about modern societies, there's a bit of that second analogy in the way that we take in information, either accept it automatically or go, this smells funny. And especially as it pertains to research in the first analogy, which is if your life sucks in your mind, okay, you've been told it sucks. You've been told who to hate and who to love. Remember that and repeat that, because that's the disease of, I believe, both extreme sides of right and left. They tell you who to hate and they tell you who to love. You don't get to make a choice. Now, that's bred by chaos. The kid who's got a college degree but can't find a job in anything that they did, and a lot of the schools are turning out careers that are unemployable. But what do the rich do? Remember what I said about the trash? They create trash because it's an ego play. Ego. Rich, ego, poor, desperate. Well, you can be poor inside your mind and have amenities that half the world doesn't even have. But as long as you're told that you're poor, you'll behave like you're poor. But the rich that I deal with, they do this thing. I just got done with a chain of email with a friend of mine who went and got that shot. Asked me if I was going to get it yet. Had I gotten it yet, right? Which is one of these things, I expect you to get it. It's such a entitled statement, or such a, I don't know, just gross. It's none of your business if I do. But if you're going to ask me, you should just ask me straight out, well, have you got, what do you think about it? Are you going to get it? Instead of, have you got it yet? So I threw back all the research and experience that I have in pharmaceuticals. My obsession with virology as a science since the mid-'80s. My physics teacher teaching us I took every class this guy took, probably took 2 years to get through his courses on the same subject matter. The email I got back said basically, well, I just took the damn thing, whatever, all your weird things and stuff. It didn't say I was a conspiracy theorist. But said that, if my immunity disappears, well, whatever. Wow. How much research does it take to hear a dissenting voice in any particular area, to hear the other side of the game? Well, when you take personalities and you promote them to godlike capabilities, some journalist or something that you trust 100%. I mean, what's that old saying? The old saying is, if you could die, the way they say it is, at your death, if you have met 3 people that would lay down their life for you, that aren't your family members, they're your friends, you are the richest man in the world. Because people will come and go. But if you could die with those people in your camp, then you got it. Do you randomly get that through the television? through the internet? I mean, is there anybody on CNN or any of these channels that are people you would die for? Well, you better, because they're giving you advice about what to do. And you're taking it with the risk of hurting yourself. Potentially, really badly, in a really like horrible way. Have you ever had a friend? I had a childhood friend of mine die of AIDS. It's not well, he looked so good yesterday and now he's gone. No, man, you rot in a bed, man. And you rot in different ways depending on one of the 43 things you can catch when you have no T cells just eating you alive. You can drown in your own fluid. I mean, you can get lesions all over your body. It's just not fun. So yeah, a little skeptical. When the people that are telling you that something is true, let's just forget about this 2020 thing for a second. When the people that tell you something is true are either not articulate or they seem to be just repeating these talking points that have been written for them, and you know that those have been written for them because you've been hearing them for the last 20 years if you follow a particular area of interest, right? The rebuttals that they get are usually canned by someone who's trying to set up a canned rebuttal. And so the responses are the same and usually involves name calling. And that's just purely a name calling thing. You can be frustrated and throw out a name every once in a while, but then follow it up immediately with, look, boom, 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 boom. What's interesting about today in 2021, and the older you are, the more this is like in your face. And I would say 40 and up, at least. If you can sense this below 40, then you have an exceptional mind with the limited range of experience that this particular comment's going to address here. And this is just an old man statement here. We know that society develops, evolves, and changes, right? We do. And we know that we think differently over time. When you hear a story about like Salem, Massachusetts and the witch burning, and then you see that scene in Monty Python and the Holy Grail where they're weighing the woman and they're just so eager to kill someone else because they hate themselves. And what Dr. Saul said something today on Twitter. He said, when it comes to a person who hates themselves, seldom do they choose to hate themselves, which means they hate you because they can't bring themselves to hate themselves, even though that's what they do. But society thinks differently now. And what's so sad about it is it used to go at a much more methodical pace of perhaps religion. Like if you go back to Salem and if you were to, there's an old story and there's two tellings of the story. One of the first gentlemen to import tobacco to Europe, there's two ways the story's told, but the funny one is that he pulled out a cigar in front of his wife and lit it up and then retroed the smoke through his nose. She sees him do that, and because she's very simple-minded like everybody, it's not a woman thing or anything, she thinks he is breathing the smoke from the devil and that he has been possessed. And then one of the stories is that she runs down the street and gets her husband in trouble, gets put in jail for a little while. The other story is that he did it in public and a bunch of people did that to him. That sounds a little more believable. But the point of the story is that if we were in the witch hunting era of Massachusetts, which I forgot what the years are, I think it's the 1600s. I've been there. I went to the wax museum and all the models were all melted. It looked crazy for a totally different reason. And they're showing you all of these wax figures and they're all melted like a candle, like badly, super badly. And you're like, what is that? Like, if you said the wrong thing, you could be incarcerated, hung, killed, heresy. Your level of representation would be zero because your attorney is probably going to be trying to get you killed as well. I think that it was more organic, the evolution of the way that man behaved and talked to each other. And today, all that has to happen is a a CEO says that this is bad, this is good, and boom, everybody believes it. like a channel like Netflix releases a video, TED releases a TED Talk. All the pundits on the fake news say things, and it completely instantaneously changes the way you think. It becomes some trending hashtag or something like that. Boom, everyone doesn't like something that was actually just fine. And, they practiced in the late 80s with this whole ozone layer thing. It's really funny. The DuPont Corporation had the patent on Freon. But they were going to lose the patent, I think, around 82, 83. And they wanted to get that banned and get the new thing to be the only thing that was usable. And they had the patent on that. So they needed to legislate against their old product being made in a generic sense and then get the new one to be the only one regulated. So DuPont, at least a year before their Freon patent ran out, started lobbying Washington to hate their own product, to develop this out of sight, out of mind stuff called ozone, which, my God, at the turn of the century, from the 19th century to the 20th century, was Tesla invented ozone generating machines where you would, get some on your face and stuff. And now they'll tell you you're never supposed to even breathe this stuff. But we're supposed to keep a bunch of it at the bottom. Okay. All right, whatever. And so it got so ludicrous that by about 93 or so, Star Trek Next Generation, embedded it in a script. It's in a bunch of stuff back then. Well, they're paying off Hollywood to put the stuff in television shows and movies. Little on the cray-cray side, wouldn't you say? So now imagine you're way up at their level. They're pushing so many agendas, it's crazy. I mean, it is insane. And what's insane is that they're actually capable of keeping these things in our minds, at least especially in the susceptible. What are some of the more popular ones? Well, 2020 we already talked about, and it's all over the place. You'll never forget that one. But supposedly, the weather in the world is supposed to be 72 degrees globally, and you're never supposed to be cold. You're never supposed to be really hot. It's never supposed to rain, or it's supposed to rain a lot. Whatever is going to go against what you're experiencing is what's supposed to be the case. All the ice that we drill from the past is supposed to be 100% unchanged. The sea levels are always supposed to stay the same. Absolutely patently ridiculous assertions on an organic object that we live on. But people are swallowing it up. Why? Because it gives the inept, the self-loathing, the powerless, sudden power. I can walk out into public and start yelling at people. Like I say on the show, their intellect is so shallow that they don't realize that everything that we use for power today is picked by those who are paying for the movement, right? Nuclear power ain't any human being's idea that's just sitting around, hey, what do you think we should do today? Well, we should build a nuclear power plant. Oh, that sounds great. What's it do? Well, coal, oil, all this stuff. It's all started by oligarchs who spend billions of dollars to develop trillion-dollar businesses, to develop products that rely on those fuel resources. And now all of a sudden, we, the consumers, are the bad people for buying their product. It's tantamount to Apple Computer coming out and saying that all of their devices are atrocious for the environment and how dare you buy them. And that you should give Apple your money so they don't have to make those devices anymore. I mean, that's how stupid it is. Companies, like I said in a recent episode, companies that are claiming to be green are creating giant landfills of things that don't have to be there because they shouldn't be changing the port on a computer. Metal that connects to metal can do whatever electricity can do over that metal, right? Unless you're inventing brand new metals that can take electrons and move them faster than the speed of light, which if you do longitudinal waves, you can develop a circuit that will travel 11 times the speed of light, as Eric Dollard proved in his basement on video. Go see the Badlands videos on YouTube. What other ones are out there? Well, apparently, there's not just two genders to the world. Mental identification is now being put on top of your X and Y chromosome designation. Hey, I don't have any problem if people have other identifications. My whole life I've been with people identified as Christians and Jews and atheists and, Buddhists. It's never bothered me once in my life. So if you have Y chromosomes, but you identify as X, well, then you're still Y, but you identify as X. That's fine with me. Swap the other way. It doesn't bother me, man. If your choice and identification makes you molest a child, become a chomo, or you decide you need to kill people, well, that's where we kind of, people identified as Satanists at different times, moving a church of Satan into a neighborhood, and then kids start disappearing. Well, maybe we should take a little look at that, because that's not a do no harm situation. That is, do whatever you want for yourself, the absolute charter of the Church of Satan, and we probably should step in. But outside of that, hey, you can have 1,000 identifications, 1,000,000 identifications. There's only two genders. Really sorry. If we were to create the binary, or what is it, the asexual gender, we'd have to have some sort of other letter, maybe a Z chromosome, and you're both. You're Y and you're X, and you can procreate all by yourself. Hey, man, call me if you have that, because I'd love to see how that works, right? Maybe not. I don't know. I put my hands over my eyes and I look through my fingers, something like that, right? But apparently, if you do get into that realm where you're not the traditional Y is Y and X is X, then you have to hate all those people that are that way, and you have to think in your head that they hate you. Totally not the case. Absolutely not the case. Ridiculous assertion. Yeah, for some people it's a shock, I think. Well, it's probably a shock for all of us initially, but it just depends if you're going through that shock at 12 years old versus maybe 42. It's going to be a different thing. I'm always hoping that people can get that information when they're not next to someone, so that they don't do something funny and weird. I was talking to a friend of mine who is a girl now, used to be a boy. And I was telling her, I said, look, when I was in California, I think it was must have been 88. I was working a really late shift, and I was going home, and I always went by this donut store on the way home. And it was like 4:30 in the morning, because I came in at 4:30 in the afternoon. I worked 12 hours, and I went home. And there was a guy behind the counter, poor dude. I assume he's like Chinese or something. Barely understood English, but I could just point at what I wanted, and it was all good. And I'm standing there, and so I'm kind of groggy, a little bit. I got about a 30-mile drive home to Moore Park, and all of a sudden, right through the door, a ton of people come in. This is 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, who the hell's up, in the morning? Still kind of weird to this day. But it was a woman asking for directions to this guy, and at first I was just like, lady, this dude doesn't speak English, man. And as soon as he started trying to struggle through English, he was at maybe 10% at best. I'm sure he's better now. But I started looking at her, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, she might be a he, initially at least. But then she was with this guy. And then I was like, whoa, I am from Kansas, a little tiny place, and I'm seeing my first transvestite. And it was very interesting. It was like that strange mix of feelings of like, there was never any negativity towards the person, but it was like, whoa. And it was like, whoa. And then I went upstairs, which has this crazy staircase that went almost vertical. You get to my car, and there's a ton of people out there, and they're all couples, but they're all, transvestite male. And who knows if anybody converted physically. It's not my business. But they were at some event or something where they're all talking to each other, and I just took my bear claw and got in my car and drove home, But for me, at, I guess, 19 years old, no, I was probably 18 years old, it was kind of my first introduction to that world. And it took years before I ever experienced that again. Gosh, probably almost 10 years before I ever experienced that again. That I know of, I hate to see folks be conditioned to hate each other. Because what ends up happening, and it's the second analogy of the trash analogy, which is in a chaotic situation, you can't care about everything the way you used to, you know? You got other priorities that are on top of you. Well, if someone convinces you that the world hates you, and you buy that, you let someone else tell you who's the enemy and who's a good person. I mean, this is sort of a nice rebuttal to folks that are being ornery to you, and you know they're towing an agenda. Like when people, you can love or hate Trump. I was listening to, what was that, Aries guy from Mad TV. He did a Vlad interview a few years ago, and Vlad is a total liberal Trump hater guy. And he forces his guests, I mean, this is just atrocious interview protocol, but he forces politics on them. He thinks that's super edgy. I think it's super disrespectful. And, the Aries guy was just like, oh, Trump's a cocksucker, man. He's an asshole. He's a racist. He's a racist. But what never occurred in the interview was give me an example. Give me an example, right? But the thing is like they're telling you who to love and who to hate. The weird thing is we really don't know much about that guy to begin with. But when he wasn't president, they told you to love him. And when he was president, they told you to hate him. And it's amazing how all these loyalists to him, when he's just a billionaire, they could invest in their business and give him money. They loved him. And the same exact people turned into haters after he became president. And it doesn't have anything to do, this analogy has nothing to do with his presidency or the policies, but it's just the transition that you witness, the power of the media to convince super shallow people to believe things about someone that may or may not be true. I mean, give me something, right? It's a huge allegation. Imagine you've done nothing to warrant any accusation of racism. Let's just use that as a metric, right? Could be anything. You're a womanizer, you're a misogynist, whatever. And someone's starting to accuse you of that. And then you're kind of going, well, I'm not. Yeah, well, I heard you were. Okay, what'd you hear? Well, I just heard you were. You mean you didn't hear anything specific about me? I heard you use the dirty word once. Well, what's that have to do with this other thing? Well, it just shows your low integrity. So everything else about you, I hate you. Well, who can hate, man? Who can hate and who can love, right? Haven't you ever had a friend? And this is the counter mechanism to this crushing consensus theory. You have a friend, and my God, they're the most positive person every day. Sometimes they're religious, sometimes they're not, but they just get up and they're just like, hey guys, what's going on? Could be a girl, could be a guy. And they're push. Just positivity. And you may not be having such a great day. Now, hopefully, most of the time, they cheer you up. And they don't even know anything about what's going on. Because if you told them what was wrong with your day, they'd just be like, it's okay. And you don't want to have that happen. But just hanging out with them makes you feel better. I think that's why a lot of celebrities are fun to hang out with, because if they're not dealing with a huge stressful situation, their personas will just wake you up and make you feel good. It's strange, right? So now when you're with the person who's super positive, habitually positive, stop for a second in your brain, try to think of someone in your life that's like that. And think about them being negative. Try to remember them being negative. There's a girl I'm friends with here in California. She's an acquaintance through Facebook, got a bunch of mutual friends. Total sweetheart. Always posting something super positive. She's religious, more religious than me. But man, she just brightens my day with every one of her posts. I have several friends like this, of course. But today she posted one that was, I usually, scroll down my feed on my phone. And when you see someone's post, you look at how people are reacting to it sometimes before you actually get a chance to read it, especially if it's a giant paragraph. You're like, do I want to get into this? Is it supposed to be funny? And this one had like sad faces and angry faces. And I'm thinking, wow, her post has got this reaction? That's pretty rare. And so I read it. And it's about the fact that she, from her apartment, could hear the next door neighbor It was a husband-wife child having a brutal argument in front of the child, and the father was actually telling the kid, "Don't ever call me dad. Like, you're a little jerk," and a bunch of bad words and stuff. And the mom was putting up with the father dressing down the child to the point of like total rejection. And this is a little kid apparently, and not some teenager who, maybe raped somebody or something super horrible where you might disown them. No, it's a little kid. And her thing was like, how could this happen? How could anyone be so evil? How could a woman allow her husband to talk to her child like that? I mean, she made it like several points. And I was thinking, wow, here is her version of a very poignant statement about just not being a negative person. We have to interrupt this process within ourselves. And what I want to do with this episode is somehow find some tools for us to be surrounded by dissent, pure lunacy in a lot of cases. Sometimes it's just a difference of opinion, and not lose our cool. We vehemently hold our position, with the moon mission or something like that. Who cares? I mean, you and I believe one way. Maybe we don't even agree on it. I don't know. If you're on this channel habitually, then you probably don't think we went. See my episode 520 for the latest update. But for the bigger ones that are trying to interfere with your life, medical ones, carbon taxation ones, depopulation algorithms, general, how do we treat each other in society ones. There's nothing more sad than to see someone get created badly. Because the thing is every single one of us are without, perhaps a physical defect that creates a mental defect, which I think is super rare, but it's something we have to pay attention to. But children are always born without any racist bone in their body. Sure, I mean, it just depends on how the kids are raised. And I'm not actually sure why so many of these weird anomalies happen, but some kids won't share, some kids will share. Some kids are habitual sharers. I think they're rarer than the ones that want to keep everything to themselves. I mean, I was, a kid without any brothers or sisters, and I never felt compelled to take a toy away from a friend of mine. I don't know if that's just my brain was made better or my soul is older. I don't know. And I have a cousin that was just a little bastard. I mean, the guy was like, just from the earliest age, he couldn't handle it. And he kept this behavior at least up to graduating high school. Like, ridiculous. And I'm sitting there going, imagine, I understand if it's like, it's your birthday cake and someone's like, "Can I eat your birthday cake?" And you're like, "No, I only get one every year and I love it and it's mine." Totally get that kind of thing. But if it was like, "Can I turn your TV on?" No. It's like, it's got so many hours on the TV tube. Yeah, it's got 30 years, like, relax, man. We want to get to a level where we've kind of ascended over this problem. And one of the analogies that I love for my own brain, and I forget to use it as often as I should. And for those of you like alien discussions, are there aliens? Who are they? How would they behave if they met us? That kind of thing. Play a trick with your mind, because it may not be too far off from the truth in some cases. If we were dropped off on this planet, even if we were engineered out of the stuff that was here to build what we are, and we're more in the image of those who made us, then there's a point where we got so involved with the paradigms that we created over millennia that we've arrived at this crap hole state of mind that we're in right now. But now imagine that your ancestors, our ancestors, whichever tribe you're from, or maybe we're all from the same tribe, don't know, but they come down and they make contact with you and they're like, "Hey, we think you've got the intellect to talk to us, so that's why we're visiting you. We'd like to ask you tons of questions and, listen to what you have to say. And we've got a bunch of things we'd like to teach you." And then there'll be this back and forth where perhaps, You ask us what you want to learn, and we'll see if we got the library to teach you. Very quickly in that process, you would ascend above the BS of the world, right? Because all of a sudden, your perspective of reality would shift from, I live in Huntington Beach, I'm in California, I'm so-and-so years old, I got a kid, and da-da-da. And you would go over the clouds and think, oh my God, I'm talking to aliens. My ancestors. It automatically upgrades who you think you are. Plus, you're looking at all the people fighting on Earth going, my God, you people don't realize you're not even from here. I mean, technically speaking. And you're bickering and just fighting over stupid crap. You would ascend above it. You would see yourself differently. And if you were to spend, let's just say you're single and you work at home typically, you just finished a big deadline like me, and you can take off for a week and no one would notice. You just got to tell people you're going to go out to the desert to chill out with some old buddies of yours and no one knows who they are, but they don't even care, and you go out. But you're really taking off on a ship. You spend a whole week. Maybe time is different up there. Maybe you spend 10 years with them, but here it's only a week. And you come back and you sit down in a smoke lounge, or you go to your favorite restaurant where they're all debating whether or not to put something on their face. And your perspective is somewhat, you just saw the stars, baby. You saw your home planet, Gallifrey, man. You hung out with Time Lords, man. None of this would matter all of a sudden, really, really quickly. So my question is, can we convince our minds to do something similar like that while we're here? Just ascend above it. On that note, this is one of the reasons why, that analogy is one of the reasons why I really am disappointed in very wealthy celebrities, let's just say, who use their time to push forward these agendas. And I'm going to give you a front analogy to this one so you'll understand. Watching Big Herc 916 last night, an old interview he took, and it was about, the title of the video is something about, killing someone doesn't make you tough and doesn't make you a man. And he's talking to this other dude from Boston. And, they're talking through it, and he just said, one, if you kill someone in this world, accidentally or intentionally, there's no statute of limitations. They will come after you once they find the evidence, and you're done. And this one dude said, and he goes, first way I look at a life sentence is you're never going to get any female parts anymore. And that's enough to make you think anything through. But they talk about the lunacy of killing people. And so Big Herc was mentioning some songs, some rap tunes, right? And one of you dropped this comment about me talking about Snoop Dogg. And so I never talk about Snoop Dogg. I never talk about the gangster rap thing except to say it destroyed their own group of people and then bled into the rest of the world. So don't accuse me of glorifying gangster rap. The first NWA album had a song by Dre saying, we don't smoke weed. You shouldn't smoke weed because it's bad for you. And his first solo album is The Chronic. I've said that on an episode. Okay. But he's talking to this dude. And he says, these kids kill to get status in the neighborhood, to be feared. Because they're in themselves, like Ice-T said, they're marshmallows inside. They're really wimpy. They put all the tattoos all over themselves. The second that someone is trying to scare you by their persona, they're terrified inside. Talk to all the heavy hitters in every prison. Talk to the guards, man. The scariest dudes. Big Herc said the scariest guy he met in his 8.5 years in prison was a 5'4" white guy who was scrawny. He had some tattoos on him, but he was the nicest guy in the world. He goes, that guy was the most vicious dude. He was a shot caller. He owned the whole building. Okay, well, the inverse is this other thing, status. You do it for status. Keep that in your brain. It's a disease of man as some sort of defense mechanism. So what does that have to do with the celebrity? Celebrities already have status, don't they? Well, imagine, because I see this all the time, especially with rappers that come from tougher neighborhoods. Their game, in a lot of cases, is they want to be accepted by the intellectuals of the world. One could be cynical and say the intellectual whites of the world. It typically is. It's unfortunate. You shouldn't care about any of this whole line of thinking should be just moot and ridiculous. But what do they do to own these people? There's a couple things they can do. One, catch them in a crime. Rappers driving down Santa Monica Boulevard, picks up a transvestite, gets busted by the cops, and then some black suit shows up and goes, "We can erase this if you'll just play by our rules. And we'll decorate you if you play well. We'll give you movies. And if you come to the Capitol building, we'll put a little medal around your head. And it's just the noose, baby. We own you. Ting! Don't you feel intellectual now? Don't you feel validated now? You want some more of that? You want some more of that, right? Why would a Alec Baldwin throw down like crazy? Dude's super handsome. I bet he hasn't had any problem with the ladies. He's made some of the greatest films, television shows. The guy's mega talented. Why go there? Why go there and polarize yourself against your audience? Well, one, he could be told who to hate and who to love, and he buys it. Two, well, what is he? He's an actor. What does he do? He reads other people's lines. Other people's intellectual creations is what he reads. So he knows deep down inside the reason why he's been magnificent, other than his genetics, maybe not eating too much cake, is he's reading other people's lines. So it does leave a void inside your heart. He's not the director. He's not the writer. He doesn't light it. He doesn't shoot it. He doesn't edit it. He doesn't do the sound for it. Doesn't even do his own makeup. And so he doesn't have the fulfilled, total human persona. Perhaps, I'm just picking him as an example. And so what do? Well, you, just like the rappers, you get approached by the same group. Hopefully it's not some blackmailing situation. Could be. But even without that, I'm going to validate you. How many people were part of Project Mockingbird, all the journalists that were co-opted by the CIA? How many of them joined the CFR, the Council on Foreign Relations, so they could go up to a podium and talk to some of the most powerful people in the world and feel like when they go home, I'm somebody, just like Nathan R. Johnson from The Jerk. I'm somebody. What was his thing? I mean, how brilliantly simple is this little analogy in The Jerk? Nathan R. Johnson, a fictional character, gets in the white pages, and his boss says, who I just remembered is in History of the World, he's hung up on a pillar singing. But his boss, he used to do a lot of cartoon voices in the 70s, says, oh, the phone book's here. And so Nathan goes nuts. He's like, oh my God, the phone book is here. And he's like, I wish I get so excited about the phone book, right? And he's going through the pages, oh, there it is, right there. Nathan R. Johnson. And he turns around his boss and he goes, I'm somebody. I mean, the brilliance of Steve Martin is ridiculous. He saw that a long time ago. And the whole way his character develops in the movie of The Jerk continues this egotistical development, where he brings the mobsters to his house and they want money and he tries to kick the guy in the balls and he's Iron Balls McGinty or something like that. He gets really arrogant when he creates the OptiGrab and he gets his check for what he thinks is $150. And when the bank teller reads it to him and says $150,000. But before he even knows it's $150,000, he's walking into the bank and he's like all there and he's yeah, 150 big ones. Yep. Archetype of society, man. Instead of wanting peace for the world, they're trying to start a fight, trying to be tough mentally. Look how much juice I got. I think I mentioned this once before, but like the guy who played Pool Boy on Mad TV, I saw him in stand-up at my buddy Adam Richman's Melrose Improv show when it used to be open. He did this brilliant bit. He's an Italian guy. He did this utterly brilliant bit where, because he's Italian, he played up the whole thing from like New York, where If you piss somebody off, the guy will say, or he's trying to threaten a guy. He's like, if you mess with me, I'll make one call and you're erased straight. And so the next line he goes, the other guy says, yeah, well, if you mess with me, I'll make 2 phone calls. And, it's like this competition back and forth to see who was the badder of the two. External validation is a very dangerous game. Sometimes, depending on what kind of person you are. That's why when you can completely validate yourself, because you look at the variables and you see it, it will give you a foundation. And it's most likely a bunch of you already, if not the majority of you, if not all of you. You get this crushing consensus, this peer pressure from the outside world. And you're able to just do your due diligence. You're not just saying no for the sake of saying no. You do your research. You figure it out. I had a buddy of mine. It's funny. I've had a couple buddies like this. It comes to something ridiculous like gambling or something, right? As an analogy. Throw down $100, $100, $100, $100, just losing money left. Like the guy doesn't even know how to play the game. This is what it looks like. Loses $1,200 in 10 minutes. The dude has the money, so no big deal. Then it comes to like, I got to buy a light for my pool. Some external light that's going to plug into the ground, take solar, stimulation, and then light up at night. And the guy will drive to like 22 different pool, Home Depots, Lowe's, to figure out which one's the best one, spending probably $100 on gas to do what? To find out which 2-cent difference is going to make a difference for his pool light. What blows me away, and the reason why I'm giving you that example is because I am seeing people who typically have a discerning mind for what kind of car they buy, what kind of food they eat, how they live their life, just walk right out and get a medical regimen in the side of their arm, which has tons of evidence that says, 1, this isn't approved by any medical agency, and 2, it's had extremely catastrophic events on animals. The latest one I just saw was they said that one of the ways this mRNA stuff messes with you is that after you get it, if you get exposed to the exact thing that the mRNA is trying to protect you against, that in animals at least, okay, it overreacts and kills the animal. Well, let's just hope this stuff isn't really out there. And so they can give it to you. You don't get exposed to it because it barely exists. They've usurped all the other illnesses to get the statistics up. And it doesn't really exist in your neighborhood, and you're not going to get nailed by it. But how is it possible that happens? The other one I've noticed is that, and we have a ton of analogies and examples of this happening, which is one doth protest too much, right? The person who talks about, say, racism profusely is usually a racist. I mean, they say that, they're not one and everyone else is one. They're afraid that you'll find out what's in their chest. What they need to understand is it's all cultural. It's not pigment of skin. You may trigger because of a pigment issue. Well, that's just Pavlov's dog, man. But the thing that you're most concerned about is the cultural difference between the two of you. You don't like Sharia law to be in your neighborhood because you're a woman. You don't want to be castrated, and you don't want to be killed when your husband's done with you. Go figure that you might not want that in your neighborhood. There used to be this, there was a story actually. I just thought about this the other day. I was thinking of a script. I might put this guy in a script. So when I lived in Kansas, just before I left, someone told me a story about a dude. Maybe you guys know this story. I was told this was and this may have happened in different places from different people. There's a dude in South Kansas City. I don't know much about Kansas City, to be honest, but there's a southern area of Kansas City in the late 80s where homosexual men would pick up tricks for prostitution. And so you could just drive down there and apparently find these guys. Well, this big dude used to come down there. And he would, pretend like he wants a trick. The guy would come up to the car, lean inside, and at some point in the discussion, the guy would punch the dude in the face, injuring him, breaking his nose, hurting the guy, and drive off. And he got notorious for this. And of course, he's yelling stuff about how horrible these people are and that kind of thing. Then the story ends where he disappeared. And so when they were telling me this story, my friend was telling me this story, I said, oh, someone killed him, huh? Right? He's like, no. They found him a year later or so turning tricks down there as a woman. He had it in himself and was lashing out at people because he didn't want to accept who he was. And so eventually something turned him and he ended up dealing with it. According to some very powerful sources, one of the most, and this has been, all of you know this, but one of the most dangerous male human beings, and I'm going to say, well, actually, I won't say it, but it's, I was going to say a particular race, but actually I think it's over at least white and black. Seems like there's a lot of white guys that do this, but one of the most, dangerous white guys to be around, or dudes to be around in general, is a guy who's latent homosexual, who will not come out, and is being blackmailed. Unbelievable that in 2021, with all this acceptance and all this reward for being exactly who you are, who you feel like you are, whatever, right? Call it whatever you want, that anyone would be hiding. We've had so many celebrities come out, but they're still hiding. It's crazy. Let's go back to our subject, dead on. How do you deal with this whole thing? This incredible pressure. Sometimes you'll get pressure on things, again, sort of ancillary parts of history. Lee Harvey Oswald killed JFK. 9/11 was a bunch of Arabs, Things that really sort of rub you wrong, right? Because you've got people that should be found guilty, going scot-free, people who didn't do anything or might have been loosely involved getting murdered. And so you're kind of like, the story has to end some point. This lie has to end at some point. Well, the truth of the matter is you're not the whole world. I'm not the whole world. And I think that there is ample evidence now, I'm just starting to realize this, that history is sort of a bogus construct created by the countries that are pushing a particular package of propaganda to fortify the constitution of their citizens. There's a country out there that seems to be digging up history about every 2 years. I just saw another video. I won't mention the country, but they're digging up artifacts that look like they were made yesterday, trying to say that they're super duper old. And it gives a country that doesn't have a deeply documented past of equal participation in, say, engineering or something like that. It gives them this notion that, and by the way, they definitely take pot shots at, engineering. There's always something about whatever they dig up that says, that no other country and no other people on planet Earth had this ingenuity to do what we found in the ground. And it's like, okay, whatever, man. Just create it, bury it, dig it up, and tell whatever story you want. So what I'm trying to say is the whole world's full of shit. And the internet especially has made us feel like, as I say all the time, that we have to give a shit about all the bullshit. And it's like, you don't. You really don't, right? Now, there's some exceptions that you have to deal with. Some of you deal with it beautifully. But if you have a kid or kids, that's where the horror show starts. Let me give you some advice, because I've seen it done very successfully. Now, I was very lucky that my kid got to a very formative age, I should say, prior to the net consuming her, right? My kid doesn't really like the net from all I gather. Probably as a research tool, but not as much as a social media thing. But if you have a kid today, you're going to have to start immediately with your kid. Probably actually daring to say, Okay, here's the thing. I'm going to make you as smart as possible and as happy as possible. That's my job. And I'm here to protect you and put a roof over your head and food in your mouth. But in order to accomplish that, does that sound good to you? We can't allow the outside world in these select areas, okay, to come into your life, to come into our house and convince us who to hate and who to love, what is good, what is bad. We have to work together as a family. Luckily, your mother and I have worked on a bunch of this stuff before you were born. And get them to buy into the franchise of this sort of quarantine. And then you're going to have to figure out, a way to make sure your kid is not socially awkward and all that kind of stuff. Now, the problem is if they go to a public school or even a private school, good luck, man. They're all up in those things. That's why private schooling for me is not about how good is the education. One, Civil War soldiers had better vocabularies than we do by 10x, and they only had 8th grade education. It's getting taught in little, barn house schoolhouses in the Midwest, right? So it could be done. God forbid you just worked on reading, writing, and arithmetic, man. I think homeschooling is more about protecting your kid from the cultures of the world. Homeschooling cuts Al Gore off from your kids. Homeschooling cuts Greta off from your kids. It cuts out everybody, the Podestas, the Weinsteins, the Maria Abramoviches from the world, the Bill Gateses of the world, cuts them all out. If you homeschool your kid, do you have to worry about a vaccination immunity card or exemption form? Nope. And honestly, the crazy truth is, like, if I were to be bumping into this situation, man, I know communities in the Midwest, exactly where I was raised, that have schools that have all the grades in one building. You have to make sure meth isn't anywhere nearby. So when they do have to go to the upper grades and get education, now I'm probably capable of teaching K through 12 to a kid at exhaustive levels, but most parents aren't. But you could learn. You could. Because the thing is, like, say they're in first grade and you're doing your first grade things, and you know that your education maybe tops out in terms of the diversity of fields around 10th grade. Like, say you're a biology expert, and you're like, man, when my kid needs biology, I'm going to ace that. But I'm not a really good something else, computer programmer, math, art, whatever. Okay, well, you're going to have 10 years to figure that out before your kid needs it. Maybe. The physically moving to raise your children, I think, I've seen it around here a lot. I have friends of mine that lived right here in Huntington Beach, which is a great place to be. But they just picked up everything and went to Florida. And they're posting little videos of their kid. Hopefully it's got a really great school. But I know both parents are extremely awake, very trendy, very cool. And I think that kid's going to get one of the best lives that any kid I know will get. I think some of the rhetoric on the side of concern is a little, in my opinion, a little too militant in its form. Meaning, the way that they tell us to resist the pressures from the outside is a little too militant in areas where there is no chance of it getting to that level of needing to be militant about it, right? Now, again, we don't know how 2021 is going to end, or 2022 or whatever, how this regiment is going to be turning into passports of a particular kind, whether or not anyone's going to ever try to come to your doorstep and force you to do it. Those are, again, I would say, sort of romantic, macabre stories to tell you, like romantic darkness to tell you, to get a huge rise out of you. Part of it is someone posts something online to say something like that was maybe some fake right-wing stuff, because it's happening. I got a friend of mine keeps sending me a bunch of fake news. They want you to publicly, within a social media element, resist it with your words, resist it with your like or your hate or whatever, because you can put the mad face on things. And then the AI goes, oh, we have a resistor here. And it just keeps upping your profile for this is a red A-line FEMA camp person. Immediately execute this person when you catch them. When we pull the Georgia Guidestones out because the generals of America are a bunch of pussies. And on the note of swallowing fakeness on the side of capital T truth, I mentioned just recently in an episode that Stanford had released a report covering all of the physical problems of gagging your nose and your oxygen levels and breathing your own CO2. Now, the information in the report that was reportedly coming out of that organization is all legit stuff. We've heard it since last year. And again, people who try to say that surgeons and nurses wear these during operation, they take breaks every 20 minutes. It's not to protect you against viral matter. It's to protect you against the bacteria coming out of their mouth. And it really doesn't do a very good job either way. If someone's really sick, they're going to get your inside sick. The night that I heard that this report had come out, I'm watching a Rumble video that the guy who owns the place is pushing to his phone. And they're scrolling through this article in 1 video, 2 video, 3 video. I'm the only one in the room that seemed to be paying attention, I guess, because I went back and said, was that thing real? Because I was told it wasn't real. Oh, I don't know. I'm like, oh, great. So you're playing a bunch of bullshit and you don't weed it out before I watch it, or you don't pay attention to it so we can build up a construct in our mind of what is true and what is fake, So you're going to have a lot of good-hearted people who just swallow crap instantaneously. It's really, really sad. You'll have friends that bring you some really good evidence that you even found before they gave it to you. So thinking, oh, this person's got a good mind. They're really vetting stuff. And I got a friend of mine that sends me stuff every day, 4 things a day. That when I go back and say, by the way, this one's bullshit. This one's bullshit. What are you doing sending this to me? Oh, I don't care. I actually had someone say that to me. I don't care. It's mostly true. And it makes people think about it. Like, well, guess what happens to all your shit? Delete, 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 or ignore, ignore, ignore. Now, could Stanford have submitted this report and then the news simply reports that it didn't exist and everybody at Stanford says, internally people get in trouble and it's like they deny it ever happened and say they're super pro-mask? Oh, yeah. Oh, definitely. But could someone create clickbait? Sure. 100%. So believe me, the game is being played against us at all levels. Luckily, with some of the big ones we've mentioned in this episode, the truth came out before they could spin it. I'm going to be checkering these episodes between the bigger ones, and I want you guys to know, as we end this, you guys have been giving me a ton of suggestions. Again, I need as much precursor information as you possibly can. Because people are like, hey, read this 2,000-page book and tell me what you think, And so when I get the person telling me what's in it, it really super duper helps. Or a website or an article or a bunch of videos or whatever. Just say, look, I think your catch, your little hook right here in your episode would be this right here. This dude is an electrical universe guy and he tied it to quasars. I mean, whatever it is, right? He's got a very interesting view on something. But if you haven't been to deepthoughtsradio.com, I'm going to give you a short bumper today. Please go. It's got everything you'd ever want up there. Please bookmark it in case we get moved around. Don't think it's going to happen. To all my Patreons, thank you so much. The link is up there on the website, and it's in the description down below. Take care of yourself and someone else, and I'll see you in the next Deep Thoughts. Over and out.